So there's a term in jiu-jitsu that's being used a lot now. It's called the wedge. And you're the first person that I ever heard use it. That was back in October of 2015 when we filmed the BJJ formula. Since then, obviously, John Danaher talks about it a lot. Now we start seeing other people talking about wedges as well. So I'm wondering if you can define a wedge and then show a bunch of examples of how wedges are used in different kinds of situations on the mat.
Sure, absolutely. So I guess the technical definition of a wedge for the from the simple machines in physics is it's a portable inclined plane. The simplest example I think people would be able to gravitate towards is a doorstop. So basically the wedge is going to use a certain amount of friction to keep something in place or to pry something apart. So in terms of the leg lock control positions that have become revolutionized obviously by Danaher, Death Squad, and those guys, we've got opposing forces. So I want to create a pin at your hip, and I'm going to try to create a wedge around your knee. So rather than attempting to squeeze my knees together, we're like, if I release the pressure here, you just pull your leg out, right? So I'm creating a certain amount of friction, but because the pressure is coming on equal sides, I'm obviously not using a wedge. But if I can create an opposing force where my thigh here, the top one, is driving down and slightly up, whereas this one is driving down. So you can see like this kind of angle, yeah, exactly. And I can let your leg out and you can still pretty much drag me across the floor. So that's, I think, where most people are hearing about it nowadays is with the popularization of the new school method of leg locking, is the application of wedges to control a limb, to isolate, to pin.
Okay.
However, I would say the majority of practitioners have been using wedges for a while now in a method where we're trying to pry limbs away from the body.
And to be clear, people have been doing this for hundreds of years.
Of course, yeah.
It's just a new name for it now that helps with the conceptualization.
Yeah, exactly. And I think anything where we use more like concrete physics terms is, I think, good, because you can get a little bit lost in terminology in jiu-jitsu. So physics should be universal.
So you're saying if I'm all defended.
Yeah, so even something as simple as an underhook. Sure. Right? If I'm trying to just like move your arm away from your body rather than just, so this would be me using my forearm and the underhook as a wedge to separate your arm from your body. With a Kimura, if I can stick my arm, away, like another example, we use the doorstop example. Another example would be a crowbar, right? You're going to pry something apart by using a thin edge to come through and then rotate it open using my forearm to complete the wedging action, right? If you want to go like a little bit deeper with the wedge example here, if I create with my right forearm here, an opposing force in this direction and a bit of a downward force with my left forearm here, even if I'm not controlling the Kimura, go to slip your arm back. So I'm wedging against it with my forearm. So that would be where we're keeping something in place via the use of a wedge, as opposed to prying something apart. We do this.
What about choking? So we've done the legs, we've done the arms.
Yeah, absolutely. So with choking, when I'm attempting to get a rear naked choke and you're tucking your chin down, exactly. If I just try to bring my hand in front, my forearm is going to be around. And it's not that you can't make this work, right? I can certainly choke over the jaw, but if this gets higher up on exactly, it's preferable for me to get underneath your chin. So there's a couple different ways to do it. Some people use their fingers like this. I like to use this lead finger. We call this an arrowhead, which is reinforced by my thumb. And then use that to, yeah, exactly. So that's where I'm using the wedge to separate a limb from your torso to open up space to get into, again, whether it's an arm lock, whether it's a choke. And then the various limb control positions tend to operate more successfully as if you employ some kind of wedge mechanic than if you just employ a strict like squeezing isometric hold where you're trying to basically like a vice, right? The odds that you can generate enough pressure with a vice, like a direct squeezing force, enough to hold somebody, especially in no-gi when people are sweaty, is dramatically lower than the odds that you can create enough pressure with a wedging mechanic to keep someone in place.
What about escaping a position?
Yeah, so if we want to use the underhook as an escape example as well, right? Like where you see people commonly fail with the underhook is if they stick this arm in here like this. This is not, yeah, exactly. This is not a very good wedge that I'm creating here because I'm not able to create enough of a separating force. Like the wedge is not
just like robust enough. But if I use my elbow here, this is a really strong wedge, right? Like when I start to stick my arm in here, the angle of the angle of the wedge is not appropriate, right? Whereas here, the angle of the wedge is narrow enough that I can open this space up and get my underhook. So I find that people who struggle with the underhook, they're applying the wedge improperly. They're coming in at the wrong angle, and you need a little bit more of a narrow angle coming in, and then as you get in through the initial sort of like opening or gap to insert the wedge, now the more you open up the angle, the more effective it becomes. So if all I were to do is stick my arm straight through here, right, I've got a very narrow angle at the beginning, at the point of entry, but now I'm not really using a wedge.
Leverage at all.
Exactly. But here, my elbow is narrow enough, but now the combination of like the pyramid or triangle shape of my triceps and forearm, this becomes very powerful as a wedging mechanism to open something up.
So in the case of the side mount escape or the underhook, there, getting the choke, getting the arm lock, the wedge is moving.
Yes.
In the case of the leg lock, the wedge isn't moving, but I'm trying to pull out.
Exactly, which is adding to the friction that's keeping you in place.
Right. So either the wedge stays in place to stop a moving object, or the wedge is moving to move
a stationary object.
Yeah. Awesome. Well, I hope that helps people understand what the new school jiu-jitsu people are talking about when they say wedge.
Yeah, it's massively thousands of years old technology.